Almost everyone has done it. You reach for a slice of bread, notice a small spot of mold on one end, tear off that piece and eat the rest. It looks fine, it smells fine, the mold was only in one corner. Surely the rest of the loaf is safe. It is not. And the reason why is one of those things that, once you understand it, you cannot unsee. Let us start with what mold actually is and how it works, because most people are operating with an incomplete picture. Mold is a type of fungus. The visible growth you see on food, those white, green, blue, or black fuzzy patches, is just the surface expression of an organism that extends far deeper into whatever it is growing on. Mold grows through structures called hyphae, which are thread-like filaments that penetrate the food and draw nutrients from the interior. What you see on the surface is essentially the tip of an iceberg. The roots of the mold colony extend invisibly well beyond the visible spot, sometimes through a significant portion of the surrounding food. For some foods, this is manageable. Hard cheeses, for example, have a dense structure that makes it difficult for mold hyphae to penetrate deeply. Food safety guidelines allow you to cut off mold from hard cheeses with a reasonable margin and consume the rest. The same applies to certain firm vegetables and fruits. The structural density creates a natural barrier. Bread is the opposite of that. It is soft, porous, and full of microscopic air channels. This structure is exactly what makes it light and pleasant to eat. It is also exactly what makes it impossible to safely eat once mold appears anywhere on the loaf. The hyphae travel through those air channels with no resistance. By the time you can see mold on the surface, it has already spread through a far larger volume of the bread than the visible spot represents. Cutting off the visible mold and eating the rest is not removing the contamination. It is removing the evidence of it while leaving the contamination behind. Now here's where it gets more serious. The problem with moldy bread is not just the mold itself. It is what certain molds produce. Some molds that grow on food, including types commonly found on bread, produce compounds called mycotoxins. These are toxic secondary metabolites produced by fungi as part of their normal biological activity. Mycotoxins are chemically stable, meaning they are not destroyed by cooking or baking temperatures, and they spread easily through soft, porous foods. You cannot neutralize mycotoxins in bread by toasting it or heating it. If they are present in the loaf, they remain present after any cooking process you apply to it. The health effects of mycotoxin exposure range from acute gastrointestinal symptoms, including nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, to longer-term effects with chronic exposure. Some mycotoxins are nephrotoxic, meaning they damage the kidneys. Others are hepatotoxic, damaging the liver. Aflatoxins, produced by certain Aspergillus mold species, are among the most potent natural carcinogens known and are classified as Group 1 carcinogens by the World Health Organization. While aflatoxins are more commonly associated with grains, nuts, and corn stored in warm, humid conditions, the general principle that bread molds can produce harmful compounds is well established. There is also a gut health dimension. Research has shown that certain types of mold that colonize bread can disrupt the gut microbiome when ingested. The gut microbiome is a community of trillions of microorganisms that play a central role in immune function, inflammation regulation, metabolic health, and even mental health through the gut-brain axis. Introducing pathogenic fungal material into the gut is not a neutral act. It disrupts the microbial balance in ways that can have downstream effects on digestive health and systemic well-being. For people with mold allergies or asthma, the risks are compounded further. Consuming mold can trigger allergic reactions and respiratory symptoms in sensitive individuals, and those with compromised immune systems face more serious risks from any fungal exposure. Understanding why bread molds as quickly as it does requires knowing the 4 factors that drive mold growth: air, moisture, time, and temperature. Mold spores are present in the air essentially everywhere. When they land on bread, which is warm, moist, and nutrient-rich, they have an ideal growth environment. Mold thrives in temperatures between roughly 4 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius, which covers room temperature, and even the cooler end of that range covers most refrigerators. Bread stored at room temperature has a realistic shelf life of 3 to 4 days before mold becomes likely. High humidity accelerates this significantly. Commercial breads that contain chemical preservatives last longer because those preservatives inhibit mold growth. Artisan breads, sourdoughs, and homemade loaves without preservatives mold faster, which is worth factoring into storage decisions. On storage, the goal is to control moisture and temperature without creating the conditions that make bread go stale too quickly. An airtight container works reasonably well and is better than leaving bread exposed in a basket on the counter. A bread box, which is designed specifically for this purpose, maintains the right level of air circulation to prevent excess humidity from building up inside while protecting the bread from external air exposure. If you live in a humid environment, refrigeration slows mold but accelerates staling, which is the textural change caused by starch retrogradation. The freezer is the best option for extending shelf life significantly. Sliced bread stored in the freezer with parchment paper between slices to prevent sticking can last 2 to 3 months with essentially no mold risk and minimal quality degradation. Slices can be toasted directly from frozen. Wrapping individual portions in a linen or paper bag before placing them in a bread box is another approach that manages humidity effectively. The key is reducing moisture accumulation around the bread without creating an environment so airtight that condensation develops. The practical rule for moldy bread is binary. If you see mold anywhere on the loaf, discard the entire loaf, not the moldy slices, the entire loaf. The visible mold is not the extent of the contamination. It is a signal that contamination has spread through a larger area of the bread than you can see, and potentially that mycotoxins are present in portions that look completely normal. No smell test, no visual inspection of the non-moldy slices, and no amount of cutting off margins makes the rest of the loaf safe to eat. This is one of those food safety rules that runs directly counter to the instinct to reduce waste, but the biology is clear on it. Bread is uniquely unsuited to the cut-off-the-mold approach that works for harder foods. Its porous structure makes it a perfect medium for invisible contamination to spread far beyond what the eye can detect. When in doubt, the only correct answer is out. There is one more aspect worth addressing: the mold you cannot see or smell. One of the most dangerous properties of mycotoxins is that they do not produce a distinctive odor or visible indicator at low concentrations. You cannot smell your way to safety with moldy food the way you might with spoiled meat or dairy. Bread that contains mycotoxin contamination can smell entirely normal and look normal in the portions away from the visible mold spot. This is precisely why the cut-and-eat approach is not just inadvisable, but actively misleading. The absence of visible or olfactory warning signs in the remaining bread is not evidence of safety. It is a function of how mycotoxins behave. The overall lesson here goes slightly beyond moldy bread. It is about understanding that food safety rules for soft, porous foods like bread, soft cheeses, soft fruits, cooked grains, and soft vegetables are categorically different from the rules for hard, dense foods. For hard foods, surface mold can often be safely removed with a generous margin. For soft, porous foods, visible mold means discard the entire item every time, without exception. That distinction is the core of what food safety guidance on mold is trying to communicate. If content like this is useful, subscribe. New health videos coming to you every day.